Michelle Obama, for some reason, has decided to emerge from the woodwork again to talk about how America's racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe. This is 2008 Michelle Obama, not 2015 Michelle Obama, who was popular. I don't like this version of Michelle Obama. Neither did Americans in 2008.
Physically, there's a difference in color, in the tone.
Wow.
Because one side, all men, all white. On the other side, some women, some people of color. And people look down at that and go, yeah, that looks good. That looks right. We're probably getting a lot done and we're doing it right. You know, I look at that and I go, no wonder. No wonder we struggle. No wonder people don't trust politics. It's not, we're not even noticing what these rooms look like.
Number one, this idea that, you know, on the Republicans, they're all gray and white. That's the color palette. On the other side of the room, there are yellows and blues and whites and greens. And there's a difference because the left is just so much better at doing things because, you know, they actively have more people who are people of color. Again, if you're judging somebody's merit or their viewpoint based on their color, this makes you a racist by definition. So just because you happen to be a black person saying that doesn't make you a non-racist. So let's jump right into the mailbag. So Ian says, Ben, recently there have been advancements in science in relation to gene editing, and the future possibility of being able to safely edit people's genes seems to be getting closer and closer. From a religious perspective, do you believe this to be morally correct? I understand we are creations of God, but in examples of curing diseases and such, is it just for us to change ourselves from the way He has made us? So here is a distinction, here's a logical distinction that you can take or leave. Let me put it this way. If I had a child who was going to be, and let's say the process of gene editing did not involve abortion in any way. It was just editing a gene, so you're just fixing a problem. So let's say that my daughter had a development where she had a hole in her heart. It's fixed. She's fine. She'll be great for the rest of her life. She'll live 120 years. No problem. She's good as new. But let's say that I had the capacity to cut that out of her gene, you know, before she had to go through an open heart surgery. Would I have done that? You bet your ass I would have done that. Same thing is true for the Tay-Sachs gene. The same thing is true for BRCA, the cancer gene, the breast cancer gene. To cure diseases or prevent diseases seems to me a proper use of gene editing. And I think that's true for blindness. I think that's true for disability. I think that, you know, to prevent people from suffering with conditions, I think, is perfectly valid and normal. To enhance, however, I think you start to get into dicey territory. This idea that you're going to enhance certain people's intelligence, or you're going to enhance their muscle power, or you're going to change the color of their eyes or their hair. I think now you're starting to play with dangerous stuff, because once you do that, then you could see a situation where people are engineering human beings to be a particular way, and we feel that we are God and we can control how human beings should be from the time that they are created. You could see a very dangerous situation for a couple of reasons. One, you could see a situation where people just decide they don't want a particular type of human being, so we're just going to breed it out of the population. You could also see a situation where the people who are very wealthy can afford gene editing and their kids are perfect, and you can see a situation where poor people cannot and their kids are kind of normal. And it actually exacerbates the divide in society. I think that these are very morally fraught issues, but I don't think it's quite as easy as don't get involved in gene editing at all. Gabriel says, hey Ben, greetings from Brazil. Do you think the sharp increase in nihilism and self-hatred in the West has a direct correlation to our rejection of religion, as Nietzsche predicted? Yes, I do. I think that the rejection of faith in favor of science has led to the destruction of both faith and science. I discussed this last week in The Big Idea, but the idea that we are free human beings capable of making decisions, the idea that we have free will and change our minds, the idea that we have moral responsibility for our actions, all of these things are products of faith, not products of science. And science has actually undermined a lot of these claims, leading to a deterministic universe that forces you into a sort of existential nihilism. And that's very dangerous for society. Nicholas says, Dear Ben, today I got into an argument with an atheist friend of mine who believes that telling your kids that living a sinful life will lead you to hell is child abuse and will scar your kids for life. I'm not an extremely religious person, but I believe in my Christian values. How do I explain the morality of teaching kids about sin? Well, I mean, I think the fact is that teaching children that certain behavior is going to lead to an unhappy life both here and in the hereafter is not child abuse. It's actually a valid warning. Number one, if you're a person of faith, you don't believe that this is a conjecture. You believe that this is a fact, right? Faith believes that the idea of heaven or punishment in the afterlife or a comeuppance in the afterlife is a real thing. So it's not like you're lying to your kid. This isn't Santa Claus or Easter or the Easter Bunny, right? This is actually something different. This is you telling what you perceive to be a truth to your children, so that's not child abuse. Second of all, I think that you can make the case against sin in almost secular terms very often by simply saying that things that are sinful lead you down a road that sullies you as a human being and makes your life more unhappy. There tends to be an extraordinarily high crossover between the things that God says are a sin in the Judeo-Christian system and things that are actually that end with nasty results to you in this life as well. I think that God set out a system that has created the greatest civilization in the history of mankind. I don't think that's a coincidence. Trey says, hey, Ben, what is your Myers-Briggs type? I can't remember. What is Myers-Briggs? Is this the introvert thing? I'll have to look it up real fast. Oh, yeah, the free personality test. You know, I did it at one point, and I cannot remember for the life of me which type I am. I have to look up the types, and I probably remember. So I believe that there are, let's see. So I know I was an extrovert. I know that in terms of sensing versus intuition, I think I was a sensing versus intuition. I believe that when it came to making decisions, I was thinking versus feeling. And when it came to judging versus perceiving, I believe that I was a judging. So I was either an ESTJ or an ENTJ, I believe. So that's for whatever that's worth. That's what I think I was anyway. I can't remember, to be frank with you. Okay. Joy says, do practicing Jews still believe that there is a Messiah, and why is there a difference between Jews today and Jews of the Old Testament? Thanks, love your show. So, yes, practicing Jews believe that there will be a Messiah, and when he comes, he will pursue certain functions. He will reestablish a temple on the Temple Mount. He will be responsible for the ingathering of exiles. He will establish peace in Israel. This is according to Maimonides. He has basically a very simple set of tasks. He's not some sort of superhuman figure. He's not a god come back to earth or anything like that. And as far as the difference between Jews today and Jews of the Old Testament, so Jews of the Old Testament were living, the traditional Orthodox answer is there's not a huge difference, but the truth is that there's been development in Judaism through the Oral Torah, through the Talmud. The rabbinic law has obviously developed a fair bit since the Old Testament, so there's a lot of stuff that Jews do today that's not explicit in the Old Testament, but we feel is implicit in the Old Testament. And so Moses may not recognize some of the practices that we pursue today in Judaism, but the idea in the Talmud, and explicitly says this in the Talmud, is that Moses would come back and he'd be happy that he doesn't recognize that because he set up a system of lawmaking and law-giving, and we've developed that system. Sort of the same way that the founders might come back and look at America and say, wow, I don't really understand a lot of this, but they'd be happy with the system that they created. Luke says, what do you think of the idea that automation will one day take over so many jobs that a universal basic income might be necessary? So, as I've said before, I think that it's possible in the future that automation may do that, but I think that we are a long way from that. Right now, employment is nearly full. Every time there is an uptick in technology, there's a similar uptick in jobs of another type. I know that everyone always thinks that we've reached the end of the industrial road. People thought that in 1850 with the Industrial Revolution, which is why they were breaking machines. But I don't think that we've come close to that yet. John says, hey, Ben, at any point in time did you consider joining the military? Yeah, actually, after law school, I considered whether or not to join JAG. One of the reasons that I didn't join JAG at the time was because as an Orthodox Jew, it's a little bit difficult to be in the military. It's not to say the military wouldn't accommodate it, but there are conflicts, religious conflicts in terms of holidays off and Sabbath off and all this that conflict a little bit. There are a lot of Jews who do serve in the military. There are Orthodox Jews who do serve in the military, and good for them. There's a group actually that I support called JFAM that provides support to Jews who are in the military so that they can do all of these things and serve in the military. Let's see. Jim says, hey, Ben, I would like to know your thoughts on the new intentional walk rule in baseball. I always believed that having to actually throw the pitches would mess with the pitcher's rhythm and therefore add a readjustment dynamic when facing the next batter. What are your thoughts? So I think the rule is stupid. This idea that you just signal and then somebody goes to first base as opposed to throwing the 4 pitches. I've actually seen games where there's a man on third and they're intentionally walking somebody because it's man on second and third and they want to set up a force, and the pitcher throws it away and the run scores. So I think that this is a dumb rule. Yeah, I don't think the problem with baseball is the speed of the game. I think the problem is the speed of life now, and so a lot of people don't get it. But I was at Dodger Stadium 2 nights ago, and the place was packed. I mean, it was packed to the gills. Every seat was filled. There's still a lot of interest in baseball. It still draws millions and millions and millions of people to the ballpark every year. The one rule I do like is I do like this rule. The 30-second rule for pitches, I think, is good. And I think they should also have rules about how many times batters can step out of the batter's box and adjust their gloves and all this stuff. The pitchers have a rule. I think the batters should have a rule, too. Once you're in the batter's box, you get to step out like once during an at-bat, but you don't get to step out between every pitch. Jackson says, hey, Ben, do you believe the Earth was formed over 6 figurative days, or do you believe it was formed in 6 literal 24-hour days? So Gerald Schroeder is a scientist who's written a book called God, Science, and the Big Bang, I think it's called, in which he discusses this. One of the problems with the literalist version of it was created in 6 24-hour periods is that the sun was not created on the first day, right? The sun was not there, and so the idea that a day in the Torah at the beginning means the same thing as a day now is kind of an odd contention. Gerald Schroeder does something really interesting. He talks about the wavelength of, I believe it's the wavelength of background radiation in the universe, and he talks about how as the universe expands, the wavelength of the background radiation gets longer, and so in fact the number of waves in a 24-hour day of background radiation actually equates to the number of waves that would have been millions of years before the Big Bang occurred. It's kind of interesting. I may be explaining it poorly. You should go read the book. Chalin says, what do puppies, kitties, piglets, and just-hatched baby sea turtles have in common? I don't even know what this means, or why this is in the mailbag, or what is going on right now. They're all animals? What is there another answer I'm supposed to be giving here? There's got to be a meme thing that I'm just not getting. Anyway, I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.